All right, we're on. And it's a little bit late. I remember what the old coach, the old ball coach used to say when we did the morning show together for years on the unfortunately not too infrequent occasions when we had technical issues, when there were delays, something went wrong, pretty much every other day. He would say, I think the rehearsal's going well. So that's kind of how it feels like, right? And I did say this is a soft launch. We're kind of stepping up our game tomorrow with the great Medea Benjamin, the pro peace, the peace warrior. If we can say that, is that an oxymoron, a peace warrior? I don't know. She's out there on the front lines fighting for peace. She's incredibly brave. So Medea joining us tomorrow morning. Hope you'll join me this morning, 240-283-7262, 240-283-7262. We've got a great guest on Monday as well, Marion Douglas Ungaro, a friend of mine from DC, a reporter, and she's going to talk about the kidnapping and killing in Mexico this week. So we'll talk about that with Marion Douglas Ungaro next week. Tomorrow, peace with Medea. And because I'm so pleased and proud to have her on as our guest, I am again promoting that with the poster, right? That poster. And you can see how really I've mastered the GIMP. Now, it's not Photoshop because I use all open source as much as I won't say all because this is on Windows 11, but pretty much everything's open source, including the broadcast software. This is Open Broadcast System, OBS, so obviously open. Or is it something that's sent for something else? I think it stands for online open broadcast system. Maybe it's online broadcast system, but it is open source. GIMP, open source. So we use open source whenever we can. I would have liked to have done this on on Fedora Linux, my Linux program, but unfortunately, there's an issue with the streaming, the OBS. What I can't remember, what is it? Oh yeah, is it the? There's something I can't do with this system on Linux, and I can't now recall what it is. It's not the OBS. It's not the streaming. I can do all that. It's at the, huh. Hmm. Oh, is it the phone? I don't think it's, you know what it is? It's the audio. I had to put in these virtual audio cables so that if you call in and I have a guest, we can all hear each other. Otherwise, there would be an issue with guests on Zoom hearing callers on my Google Voice. And I'm going to improve that system too. I'm having calls, right? You be the first one to call me live. Now I know a lot of folks watch the the video on YouTube after the fact, and that's fine. Of course, I want you to watch it. I mean, I would never say don't watch it. Please, the more views, the better. And also subscribe if you haven't already, and like if you like. I mean, I don't care if you don't like it and you don't want to like. Don't like what you don't like. But please subscribe even if you don't like it, because the more subscribers, the more distribution I get. And at some point, I might even be able to monetize this. You know, I was asked by somebody, said, well, what are you charging people? Is there some sort of a stream charge? I'm like, no, it's totally free. The only way I can make any money doing this, unfortunately, it's not really costing me anything either, but the only way I can start to make anything from this is if I get enough subscribers, and then YouTube starts shoving ads into it. Now, I know that's irritating. Nobody wants to watch the ads, but they don't cost anybody anything. And they have, and Jimmy Dore said this, people say, oh, he's a grifter, he this, he that, and he doesn't really ask for money. I mean, I guess there was this whole thing with Patreon. Is he asking for Patreon money? I will never ask you to contribute. The only thing I'm going to ask you to do is subscribe. So if you can, go to my Halitics. Well, you're watching it. You got to be. That's the only place this is going to be, because I want to get those subscriptions on YouTube. And I was also mentioned, I mean, you can click on the link at Facebook, but you can't watch, except the link will just take you to the YouTube channel and you can click there. the only other place I might in the future broadcast this without going through Facebook is my my halginsberg.com webpage. And I haven't been working on that lately, but that would be the best place other than the only place other than YouTube, because I don't want to split up views between platforms. So for now, click and watch this on YouTube and subscribe. And then if at some point there's ever an issue, then what you can do is go to halginsberg.com. I think you can see it even in that little oval there I've got at the bottom. I don't know if that's the best oval I've ever done, but it's good enough. Halitics. All right, so Medea will be with us tomorrow. And I hope it's not a rough opening. It may be, just because I have to go downtown to DC very early tomorrow morning. All right, let's get to the topics. You know, one thing I have said about my program and why you should watch it on YouTube and you should watch it live is because I'm about the only host out there who's consistently going to take your calls and talk to you. But there's another reason, and that reason is there's no third rail on this. I will talk about anything, and I will take positions that some of you will be offended by, will be irritated by, will find offensive. I guess if you're offended by it, that means you found it offensive. So I'm being a little bit duplicative there, right? Or redundant or something. But I do not hide my views. And I was, in areas where there's controversy. And I've been sort of taken to task. Now, I'm an organizer. I work for, or I don't really work. I am a volunteer organizer and the state organizer for the Our Revolution Maryland group. And that actually I parlayed into a 4-year staff position at Our Revolution National as ultimately the national coordinator. I resigned from that position full time as of January 1st so I could devote myself to doing this program. And there were some other issues which I may or may not get into at some point. But basically, I wanted to devote myself to other projects and really get this thing going if at all possible. I'm still doing work for them. They still have me on as a contractor. So I do ad hoc work for them, but I'm not full time. But so we're transitioning. We're trying to get this thing to work as well as we can. And that's exactly what I'm doing here with this program with you. But I've been taken to task, and I was taken to task recently by one of my Facebook friends. I'm not going to say any names, but in fact, 2 of them. But one of them was with DSA, the other with my group, Our Revolution Maryland. And I was posting about J.K. Rowling, the author, and how it was a defense of her against attacks that she is transphobic. And I felt they were unfair. I felt she was making legitimate points. And I said that. And there was a lot of pushback and a lot of disagreement, not from a lot of people, but from 1 or 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. And one of the people said, you should pull your posts. And I didn't think about pulling. I'm not going to pull from Facebook. But they said, if someone reads that, they won't think you're progressive. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look progressive. You can go to, by the way, facebook.com and check out Hal Ginsberg if you want to read it. And I'd love your feedback. Please provide it. I do think some of the language I used there maybe was a little bit over the top, maybe arguably, but I'm not going to pull anything. I'm going to stand by it. I said it. I might at some point try to put a little bit of a caveat on there, but first of all, let me just say very clearly, I do support trans rights. I think that the attacks on trans people by the right are ugly and wrong. I have some questions about ages, whether it does make sense for especially pre-adolescents to start transitioning, but I think the evidence suggests that on balance, they're healthier when they transition earlier. Trans people do better if they transition on balance earlier. It still makes me a little queasy for adolescents, 14-year-old, 15-year-olds, 13-year-olds to take hormone treatments, or even more drastically surgeries, but apparently the outcomes are better. So I acknowledge and I accept all of that. That said, I do have concerns about especially trans women, in other words, uh, people who are biologically male, um, in traditionally female spaces. I have concerns about that. And I've raised those concerns. I think J.K. Rowling has raised concerns, whether it's in women's shelters or shelters for victims of domestic violence who are bio females. I have concerns about trans females in those environments if there's fear, if there's fear among the sheltered women. I also have the sheltered bio women. I also have concerns about um, trans women competing in sports on a high school level and on a college level or on a professional level against bio women. I have concerns about that. And I'm not going to pull those back. Um, I think that they're legitimate and I stand by them. I also think that there are, differences. I don't think a trans woman is a woman in every sense of the word. She is in the sense of being gendered as a woman, as we determine or define gender. But there are clearly biological differences. And so I'm not going to stop saying that or feeling that way or expressing that. But I also get that trans people in this society, and not in every society, I remember my friend in Monterey, Marie, explaining to me that in traditional Native American rituals and rites, often trans people were celebrated and were considered, very unique members and very valued members of the tribe. So it doesn't have to be the case that a trans person is going to be facing bigotry and persecution. It's not necessarily encoded in us. In our society, there's a lot of trepidation and fear. It's getting better, but trans people are very often victimized because of their identity. And that is a terrible problem, and we must address it. And I'm going to respond to that dynamic going forward more than the dynamic that I have in the past brought up, which is that I think there are areas where I think the trans movement has gone. Some members of the trans movement have gone beyond where I share their views. All right, 240-283-7262 if you want to join me. But as I mentioned, we don't pull punches here. I do not have a third rail. There's no third rail guarding this program. So I want to get to my topic here. And this is a topic that definitely excites the passions and gets folks going. And I bring this up not to exactly excite the passion, although that may be the part of it, of course, because I want, I want people to watch and listen and be interested in what I'm doing. And controversy sells, no question, right? I mean, it's like the dog bites man, or it's, anything. Controversy sells. And reparations, and I don't like, by the way, to throw sops to the people on the left, or to just acknowledge, without questioning the conventional wisdom on the left. I just won't do that. I don't feel comfortable. That's not who I am. Maybe I'd be better off if it was who I am, but it's not. So let's get to this talk about reparations. And also, perhaps my favorite, I won't even go with the perhaps, my favorite columnist in the New York Times right now is Ross Douthat. And he's he's a Republican, self-identified Republican. I think he has the most interesting, the most provocative columns, and the most honest. I agree more with Krugman, although I often disagree with Krugman and his, he seems to have moved to further and further to the right and to a more and more neoliberal view than he used to have. And I find that very, very ugly. Probably I agree most with Thomas Edsall, and I don't always agree with Edsall, who I think has to pull punches because he writes for the Times, for the old great lady there. But Douthat intrigues me. He's more interesting. He has a world, he has a takes that are not what you read in the New York Times. And for that reason, I definitely think he's their best columnist. Here he is on affirmative action. I don't know if you can see that date. It is the 22nd of October, or is it the 29th? The 29th. It's not dated, right? I mean, this is more of an evergreen topic, or at least a topic that for years is relatively green. And he has a very nuanced view on affirmative action. And I have a less nuanced view. Here's what Duthat says. He says, look, the Asian American case, meaning, because of affirmative action, not only, it could also just be plain old racism, or it could also be simply the preferences, the predilections of the presidents of top universities to have student bodies that, at least to a degree, look like the American populace. But regardless of the rationale, the reasons for it, East Asians or Americans of East Asian descent who apply to top universities have to score higher on their tests, and they have to have had better GPAs than other applicants to be accepted. The bar is higher for East Asian, especially Chinese, I believe also Japanese applicants, maybe Indians as well. I'm not so sure about that. The bar is simply higher. The test scores that an Asian or Asian American applicant and the GPA that an Asian or Asian American applicant must achieve to be accepted in an elite university are significantly higher than white applicants, and even higher, more and higher yet than successful applicants who are African American or Latino. And what Duthat acknowledges here is that at a certain point, all minorities don't benefit from engineered diversity. In other words, where we look at a person, an applicant's race, skin color, whatever you want to call it, they don't all benefit, not all minorities. I mean, I don't want to even use the term minority. Not all groups of people, not all identifiable groups benefit. Obviously, that's the case for Asians. They have not benefited. They have been harmed, the individual Asian. And we say harmed, they've harmed in the sense that they have to achieve higher scores than others do. They have to get higher GPAs. And he brings up how the Ivy League used to have a quota for Jews too. And they are concerned that too many of a certain group will ruin the brand, the optics, the image. So all that, he's saying this is causing a real problem. No question. And, do we buy the argument? Do you buy the argument that elite universities should look to a degree like the country at large? I mean, it would be nice, right? I mean, it would be better, I suppose. I think that argument is stronger when it comes to state universities because they are funded by taxpayers, and taxpayers obviously come from all different backgrounds and all different ethnicities. So I think the argument is stronger when you come to a state university, and certainly many jobs we want diverse employment, whether it's teaching, police, service positions especially. We definitely want diversity. But there's also the question of fairness to individuals. No one applies. When you apply to a university, or your child does, they apply as an individual. They don't apply as an African American or they are, or as an Asian, but you apply as a person. It doesn't benefit you, no matter how much others may say, if other African Americans are accepted, if you aren't. And if you are accepted, it doesn't benefit others. Now, there's an argument, well, it does, it benefits the group as all. It really benefits the person admitted. So when we consider these categories, we have to recognize we're not doing any favors or very few favors to the individuals applying, except to the extent they're admitted. And then we have to get to the question of, well, who should be admitted? What's the point of these elite institutions anyway? Who are they for? Are they there ultimately to redress societal wrongs, or are they there to educate people, to educate those who are most equipped, best equipped to benefit from the education, and who have demonstrated that they're going to go the farthest with it, that they've got the aptitude and the achievement. And if you've gone to, the argument, well, people who go to poorer schools, weaker schools, they shouldn't be penalized. I agree they shouldn't be penalized in the game of life. But when it comes to apply to a top institution, then it's a different question, because what's the purpose of the institution again? And I would argue that the purpose of the institution should not be to redress societal wrongs. The purpose of the institution should not be to try to balance different groups on a scale and ensure they all have relatively equal outcomes. That's not what I would say is the purpose of an institution. That's the purpose of our tax policy. That's the purpose of our employment policy. That's the purpose of our trade policy. That's the purpose of our safety net, is to guarantee relatively equal, fair outcomes for everybody. We can argue over what fair means. To me, we shouldn't put that burden on our educational systems. We should do everything we can to have good education for everyone, and that should be considered a human right. But I don't think a Harvard education, or even frankly a Cal education, is a human right. A human right is that you have a safe place to live. You have interesting remunerative employment. You have a secure retirement. And none of that is dependent, or certainly none of that should be dependent on where you go to college. All right, you're listening to the Ginsburg Show, Hal Ginsburg. And here's what Duthat writes about why he has kind of become less critical, less of an opponent of affirmative action when it comes to colleges and universities. He says, over time, I've become more sympathetic to the initial argument in this column. The idea, this is what the various justifications have been for affirmative action, whether it's that schools should look like mirror the people that they represent, or whether it's better for everyone that they go to a diverse school. He's saying, well, here's the one argument I buy. The idea that slavery's impact runs deep enough to justify some continued reparation, whether or not affirmative action is the best means. So he's saying we should do something because of slavery's impact. And I don't agree that it's slavery's impact. So this is where I'm going on that third rail and I'm dancing on it. I don't agree that it's slavery's impact that justifies continued reparations. I do believe in continued, I wouldn't call them reparations. I believe in continued support for all Americans who are struggling. I believe in a very tight safety net for every single American forever. And I also believe that the ceiling should be relatively low. High floor, low ceiling. But if the purpose of the reparation, or the whatever you want to call it, the safety net, is to address the impact of slavery, then what about people who aren't the descendants of slaves? What about people who are just the descendants of people who had really bad luck, or are alcoholics, or were working class, or were taxi drivers and now they're out of jobs because of Uber? I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at people who are suffering in society today that have zero to do with their race. So I don't think that the color of your skin or even your history or your family's history should determine whether you get benefits from a safety net. Or a better way to put that would be guarantees. I think you get guarantees of a decent life because you're a human being. And you're also prevented from taking too much advantage of your situation, whether you created it yourself or you were born into it. That, I think, addresses all of the concerns, every last one. I don't see a better solution. I don't see a fairer solution. 240-283-7262, 240-283-7262. So I don't even agree with Duthat that one's race, one's skin color, one's familial history as a member of a group that suffered the worst persecution that this country has ever meted out. Well, I mean, or one of the two worst, along with what happened to Native Americans, the genocidal history against Native Americans. You should get a decent life. You should be guaranteed a decent life, whether you're Native American, whether you're African American, because you're a human being. And nobody should get to live too well because it distorts society. So Duthat continues to say that there's real problems with the affirmative action. And he says, even though he supports some type of continued help for African Americans because of the history, he calls it reparations. He says, whatever happens is going to be really bad. Because, and he's right, it is, because whatever the Supreme Court decides is going to juggle a lot of balls. It's going to be a complete kludge. It's going to try to say you can do this, but you can't do that. But the one thing the Supreme Court will not do, cannot do in this case, is just say, hey, elite institutions, colleges should not be where we look to create, to engineer a just society. We do that through our tax policy. We do that through our trade policy, where we bring good jobs back to this country. We do that through guarantees of decent housing, good education. That's how we address the terrible injustices that have riddled this country from the beginning and continue to do so, in part because of our history, but right now, even more than because of our history, because of the policies that both parties have pursued for the past, almost 60 years, for the past 50 plus years. That's what we need to do. That's how we can make things better. Not demand from certain institutions that they provide the redress that we as Americans are unwilling to do, to provide, to guarantee for all. All right, let's see. Let's move on. Now we're talking about, and let me just go back to me as a speaker. So what we're talking about, how to make things better in America today. And I'm a little bit, I guess, am I too subdued? Do you want me to be more excited? Do you want me to shout? Call me, 240-283-7262. Get me pissed off. Remember, if you are watching at any time, hit that subscribe button. That's how I can monetize this. It takes a lot of time and energy. It really does, to put all these headlines together, to highlight. See the nice little yellow highlighting you're going to see? Biden set to detail at least $2 trillion in deficit reduction measures. Now, I like this. I think the Democrats should not simply say the Republicans are trying to hold the debt ceiling, hold us hostage because of the debt ceiling and how wrong that is. Look, we shouldn't have such a huge debt. We should address it. We should be paying off the money that we owe. And the way we should do it is the way Biden says, through more revenue, not through cuts, to the needy, but more revenue. And I couldn't agree more. Let's have a new tax on American households worth over $100 million, a really high tax. You got $100 million, you got so much money. It's just unbelievable. And of course, there are people who have 100 times more than that. There are people who have 1,000 times that have $100 billion. And 100 million is beyond just about anybody's wildest dreams. So of course we should be taxing those households. Of course we should be taxing their. I don't love taxing unrealized gains. Look, tax the capital gains when the assets are sold. I'm not sure I love a wealth tax, but tax the dividends, obviously, tax every time that you sell shares, tax when you die, tax the estate. I don't know about the wealth tax. I'm kind of iffy on that. But sure, of course, the rich need to pay much more than they are. Here's my problem with this plan. Why is it being announced when the Republicans control the House? Why is it being discussed after the midterms when the Democrats lost the House? Why wasn't Biden championing much higher taxes on the wealthy when the Democrats controlled Congress? Why wasn't there a campaign going to the American people across this country in 2021, even before Biden took office and during the lame duck period after Trump lost the general? Why wasn't Biden going across the country and saying to people, you know what, we're gonna start paying off our deficit. We're going to make those billionaires, they're going to pay more. That's it. That's going to happen. And why wasn't he doing it then? Because the Democrats, because they're in my opinion, they know this is good politics, but they don't want to do it. That's why you didn't see it when there was a chance to enact it. Now the Republicans are, we don't support taxes. The biggest lie is that raising taxes on the billionaire class is the same as raising it on the middle class. They're the opposite. They're two different things. It's sort of like when I was thinking about this in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live. A lot of people criticize the county executive, Mark Elrich, who's very progressive. They criticize him because he has opposed certain developments, certain construction projects. He is not supporting building more single-family homes on relatively large plots of land, say a quarter acre or more. He's opposed to that kind of zoning. And the response has been, well, we've got a housing crisis in Montgomery County, and he's trying to reduce the supply of housing, or he's not letting us raise the supply of housing. Therefore, he's for higher costs of housing. Well, that's a very simplistic argument. It is true that when you raise the supply of anything, you tend to reduce the price. Greater supply almost invariably lowers price, lowers cost. But the market for high income, for expensive for $1 million plus houses is not the same market as the market for people who want to purchase a house for $300,000, can't afford more. It's not the same market as people who are trying to rent at 30% of their take-home pay. It's a different market. So building more multi-million-dollar houses does nothing to reduce the cost of housing for middle-class and working-class people. In fact, it reduces their options because those single family homes on large plots of land mean there are fewer apartments built. It means there are fewer smaller homes built on smaller plots because they're two different markets. The market for middle class and working class housing is not the same market as the market for luxury homes. And if you build more luxury homes, you do nothing to reduce the cost of working class and middle class housing. If anything, you make it worse. You make the market even tighter. Well, it's the same thing with taxes. Raising taxes on the wealthy is not raising taxes on the middle class and the working class. Just like building houses for the wealthy is not building houses for the working class and the middle class. So when you raise taxes on the wealthy, you're actually reducing the burden on poor, struggling, and working Americans. But the Republicans just say, we're against all tax. We oppose tax raises. The Democrats should go. They should have gone. They could have gone. They didn't. And why? Because they are bought and paid for by the same people that the Republicans are. They should have, this billionaire class and the corporate class. The Democrats should have campaigned in 20, 21, 22 on raising taxes on the rich. They didn't. They waited until now because it's a popular idea. People understand it, but they don't want it to pass. That's why I'm so fed up with the whole system. That's why I look to the Green Party as our only hope. Doesn't mean I don't vote for Democrats when I have no choice. It means that I don't have a lot of optimism that Democrats will make things better. All right, let's continue. It is, wow, I didn't realize how late it was. Let's see, do I want to get to this next? Yeah, let's just quickly. So here's Biden again. Let's just get to this. Biden's proposals, if enacted in full, will reduce the growth of the deficit by about a tenth, so 10%, not great. Or reduce, the growth of the government budget. But they're not likely to be because Republicans oppose Biden. Of course they won't. The Republicans control Congress. It will not pass the House. And they've tried to reveal, look, so one place we've saved money is Medicare is actually negotiating some drug costs. It's saving us all money. It means seniors are paying less. It's great. It's exactly the right thing to do. Republicans are going to try to repeal that. So where were the Democrats when they could have made things better for people and they could have reduced the budget deficit? They were barely there, although, yes, they did pass some drug prescription negotiation, much less than they had promised, but something, and that's a good thing. All right, let's get to our feel-good story. Well, I talked about this yesterday. Can we stop what the Biden administration is contemplating, opening up the northern slope for much more oil drilling? Let's see. I've got a video in here. We're going to test it. Is this going to work? Let's find out. I'm clicking it now. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Here's the video. This is the TikTok. Let's hope it plays. I got to unmute her.
So we have sent over 1 million letters to Biden urging him to stop Willow. You need to let that sink in because it is a tremendous milestone. For our self-care, it is crucial that we celebrate the wins. But also, this is getting national attention, which means we have to be ready for the opposition of those who support Willow. Here are the main opposition points and why they're not true. The biggest one is that this will lower prices at the pump. But even if drilling started this year, Willow would not deliver energy products to the market until at least 6 years from now. And the market we're talking about is the international market. Willow will not lower gas prices or reduce inflation. Not to mention, we are a net energy exporter. We do not need this oil. Second big thing is that this will produce a lot of jobs in the region. But of the 1,600 supposed jobs that Willow would create, less than 1% come from the region itself. But what Willow will do is disrupt migration patterns of caribou and disrupt the way of life of indigenous people that live there. In 2023, we're not just letting indigenous people be. What Willow will do is generate at least $20 billion in damages. What we need is to have this country finally be a leader in the clean energy economy. What we need is for Biden to fulfill his pledge to not have new oil drilling projects on federal lands. What we need is to leave all the coal, oil, and natural gas in the ground, but leave no worker behind. Everyone, you're doing an incredible job. This is the final stretch. Let's keep pushing.
All right. Thank you so much, Elise Joshi. And I thought she did a great job there. Very impressed. Let's see if I can stop this. There we go. So, Elise, that's our feel good story. And as we move on, I'll get better and better at, say, displaying that kind of a video where you won't see all the, the background, the annoying stuff. But I think it can make a difference. I'm optimistic. That's my feel good story. TikToks like that, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of views, compelling argument. I mean, I get really pessimistic. I get down. I get cynical, but we got to do something. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, click subscribe.